What is up, friends? Welcome back to the Commander Brew Crew podcast, episode number 4, and we are back again for another review episode, because that's all we do now. No, I'm just kidding. We are back for another episode of new cards that we are interested in from March of the Machines, the Aftermath. We're titling this one Cards That Strike Our Fancy, because we came up with a lot of terrible ideas.
Cards, among the list was cards that rustle our jimmies, that grease our pans.
Oh, gosh. With me this week, as always, is the man coming after my job. It's Andrew.
Yep. It's only a matter of time. It's time that you reconcile the fact that your seat of power will soon be mine. He's
been starting to sway members of the board. You're going after key pieces in the arsenal.
It's a very hostile coup.
Josh is unfortunately no longer with us again because, as I can attest to, those first couple weeks are important to be home with a new baby, and he is now back to work, and I imagine loving every second of it like I did.
Well, yeah, I should certainly hope so. Certainly it's not all rainbows and unicorns and happiness, but I would hope that he's enjoying all of it.
Don't let anyone lie to you. Having a small child is literally a cakewalk. Why would anyone tell you differently? Well, today, friends, we are talking about March of the Machine, the Aftermath, but as usual, we have to start with, Andrew, what have we been brewing down on this week?
So, well, the first thing, if you guys recall from an earlier episode when we talked about just, regular March of the Machine, because I have to make sure and properly say singular machine. It's not multiple machines, even though it is multiple machines.
It's not March against the machine. It's not March around the machine. It's March of the machine.
So I mentioned one of the team-up cards that I really liked. That seemed very interesting to me because I liked both creatures originally, and teaming them up seemed like an interesting thing to see come together. So one of the ones I've been working on is Saint Traft and Rem Carolus, trying to dip my toe in the Convoke waters and doing some fun tapping, untapping stuff with some token generation. But then I'm doing 2 others right now that we will actually discuss here in just a few minutes. So we're going to keep the suspense going for a minute.
Is that foreshadowing?
No, maybe even 5 shadowing.
6 shadowing. The big thing I've been brewing down on this week, obviously, is I say it every time because I mean it, other than the stuff we're brewing for the channel, I have had a sealed Necron 40k deck sitting on my shelf for a long time now, and I've been meaning to get back around to it because I knew that it would be a deck that would challenge everything that I've ever brewed before, and I am slowly making my way through not making it literally just a block of combos.
That precon just has so much good stuff in it, just to begin with. That might be one of, I think, the most powerful, just out-of-the-box precons that I've seen. Certainly a top 5.
Do you know how hard it is not to combo in an artifact deck? I'm just like...
may even be impossible.
Yeah. And then the second thing I've been working on has been a little bit of a landfall project. There's a couple decks I've had swinging around for a while, and one of them we're going to talk about later when we get to a certain card, because I think Wizards has finally bonked me on the head enough times for me to decide to finally just test the dang thing. But Andrew, let's get into it. Let's get into the March of the Machine, the Aftermath cards that strike our fancy. And first up, we have a reprint in that pretty Throne of Eldraine frame. It's Training Grounds, one of the blue for an enchantment. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that way to cost less than 1 mana. So can't reduce it to 0, can only reduce it to 1.
Which, I see that, and I'm just like, this only costs 1 blue mana, and it's a permanent that stays down. It's not...
Oh, to less than 1 mana, sorry,
Yeah, it costs 1 mana to play on your field, and it's not enough of a red flag, at least from my perspective, for me to go, okay, that's a high priority target for removal, but it's value. It makes things cheaper. I can think of a lot of abilities that cost 2, 3, 4 manas to activate on to play on a creature, and it's value. It saves you some resources. So that's a win for me to see this reprinted.
You'd be very surprised, Andrew, to learn that. Can you guess the commander that likes this card the most? This is the most played in their deck.
Enlighten me.
Mono blue Urza, because hey, if there's any deck that doesn't want to reduce the
It's like, hey, do you ever get tired of paying 5 to tap Urza? Well, fear not. Now you can only play 3.
Talk really quickly about that, just a little tidbit. So we played some games here a week or so ago, which was actually my first game. It's a really long time since we had baby, and I put Urza in that Rashmi Ragavan deck.
Yes, you did.
And I did not kind of realize how good Urza was until I had it out, and I was like, oh, so like there's some things I can do at this point.
There's a lot, and it helped that you had a bunch of treasures and. You had the Midnight Clock, which is certainly your least favorite artifact to ever be printed.
Oh, never would play it ever.
So yeah, I definitely saw that go off, and that was fun to see you have fun.
I like that you're happy for me.
I try to be.
Andrew, what's our next card?
So we're continuing with the theme of blue. The next one coming up is Vesuvan Drifter. Costs 2 and a blue. It's a shapeshifter creature. Power toughness of 2/4. Says it has flying. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. At the beginning of each combat, you may reveal the top card of your library. If you reveal a creature card this way, Vesuvan Drifter becomes a copy of that card until the end of turn, except it has flying. Yeah, I can't think of any ways that this could be a whole lot of fun.
I mean, you could probably do something with this. I mean,
yeah. Because we all know that blue doesn't have any ways of scrying or rearranging the top of your deck to get a good card on top.
Blue doesn't have 4 separate popular draw spells for 1 mana that basically manipulate the top of your deck at all whatsoever. So.
Not at all. So you can just get whatever best creature you have in the 99 up top, or even second, third, fourth, fifth best, and just have it out there for 1 turn, and then next thing you know, it's your turn, you draw your next card again, and you get to put it out on the field, get some more value out of it. So
this card's great because it becomes a copy, so it becomes that type of that creature if that matters for your deck. Like, this card is... I actually like it at minimum because you get to look at the top card of your library at any time. Yeah. So at minimum, you're extending your hand, you're finding out more information, you kind of know what to expect.
Yeah,
and then from
sort of
there...
hand filtering.
And then from there, when you get into combat, you can make this into some gross things.
Yeah. I know blue has some fun creatures that... Imagine, having, a Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur as, the top card of your deck.
And the best part is...
Yeah, it says you may reveal the top card of your library after you've turned this into a copy. So you can keep turning it into copies of other creatures as you go along. But there's nothing that says... Yeah, no, so I guess it is until the end of turn. But yeah, imagine just getting free Jin-Gitaxias just off the top, not having to pay any extra mana for it.
There are some scary things that you could have this turn into out of nowhere, and it has flying, and it keeps flying. So there are going to be a subsection of cards, Blightsteel, Colossus. There are some creatures that you could potentially turn this into that is just going to get very difficult to deal with. Yeah, I like a card like this. I'm liking this set so far because it seems to be that this set is half new commanders and half just really interesting 99 cards.
Yeah, some good support for the decks and not necessarily... There is a lot of commander cards themselves, like actual legendary creatures I've noticed in this set, but yeah, it's nice to see that it's not just that.
Well, we're moving into our 1 black card, and that's Blot Out. 2 and a black for an instant. Target opponent exiles a creature or planeswalker they control with the greatest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. So he gets a black removal, right? A lot of upside because it can take care of a lot of things. The owner's the one exiling it, so you get around Hexproof, you get around Shroud, you get around things like that. The only downside, and I know that...
Does it get around Shroud? Oh, yeah, because, I guess...
no one's targeting it.
Okay, yeah.
The only downside is you have to target the opponent, so, of course, the opponent could use veiling effects or things like that to stop you from... But, I mean, this is a great example of a 3-mana removal spell in black at instant speed that feels really good. Yes, it's a little bit more niche, right? You want to take out the highest CMC thing, which may not always be the thing you want to take out.
Not always the biggest threat.
But let's be honest, more often than not... gonna be important.
Yeah. Usually is some part of the combo, some part of the board state that is beneficial to whichever player you're targeting.
And at minimum, you're going into combat, you get rid of that big thing that they're getting ready to swing with or what have you. The actual thing I like about this the most, and I actually just realized this, is if you're playing against a Voltron commander or an Enchantress commander that has a high CMC cost more than anything else on the battlefield, this will get around that Hexproof and Shroud to get rid of them. So this is kind of another...
This would be awful against my Gwyn deck.
Although, to be honest, let's be honest, Voltron decks aren't as popular as they used to be. It's still a good answer for something like that.
Which is a shame, because Voltron is a fun style.
It can certainly be a ton of fun, and... we may talk about a commander in this episode so you could potentially build Voltron if you wanted to.
Potentially. We'll just have to see, won't we?
Well, Andrew, next up you're talking about our first legendary creature on the list.
So next up we have Arnie Metalbrow. So a little bit different of a name from his first iteration in Kaldheim.
It's not broken anymore. It's metal now.
So he's a legendary creature, human berserker, 3/3, costs 2 and a red. He says, whenever a creature you control attacks or a creature entering the battlefield under your control, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control attacking, you may pay 1 and a red. If you do, you may put a creature card with mana value less than that creature's mana value from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking.
This is one of those abilities you got to read a couple times, because I think it's easy to everybody I've heard talk about this card has immediately gone to the second half of that first sentence. Creature entering the battlefield under your control attacking, pay 1 and a red. And they're like, oh, well, I need to play Ilharg. I need to play, Kalia. I need to play things like that. But it's like, no. This says whenever any creature attacks. Any creature. Or anything comes in.
So long as you can pay the 2 mana.
Yeah.
I just like that now. I like the picture now, because now Arnie is just twice as horny. So...
he's just getting things done. And Andrew, we have to ask the question that everyone loves to ask whenever we see a new human card.
Yeah.
We ask the question, does it Winota? I mean, it certainly could Winota.
It could. No, I look at this and I just see, you move straight into, you start your turn, maybe you play a creature, maybe you don't. Move into your combat step, very quickly. Declare some attacks or put some things down that are going to attack. Because I like that it has that second condition, because a lot of times you think, oh, creature attacking. Okay, well, this thing that came down this turn, tapped and attacking, yeah, that counts attacking. No, it doesn't. So I'm glad that they put that second little bit in there where it says a creature entering the battlefield under your control attacking. You pay 2 mana, get another free creature, potentially free creature down of lesser mana, swinging as well. And then... correct me if I'm wrong, could you then be able to do that with that creature as well? Because it came down this turn. It's a triggered
ability, so because it came in tapped and attacking, you most certainly can do it again.
So you could potentially just chain off, do 2
You'd
or
have
3
to keep
creatures
yourself
in a row.
the right mana values.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, most people that are cheating in these, if you're playing in a deck like, let's say you're playing in a deck like Xenagos, or I looked at this card for something like Ishin, where you could potentially double that whenever something attacks, right? Mm-hmm. You could take good advantage of this. You have to pick something high enough to start, and then if you start at a good position, you may be able to just dump in a ton of things out of your hand. So, I mean, there's some pretty convoluted messes of combos you could try to pull off, but my thought process is maybe your commander's 6 or 7 mana, you attack with it, pay 2, and get something else in that is just going to help run over your opponents.
Yeah, this new Arnie is looking really cool.
Next up, we got a sorcery in red, Reckless Handling. 1 and a red for a sorcery. It says, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle, then discard it random. If an artifact card was discarded this way, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So we fixed gamble a little bit by making it target an artifact.
It's now specifically targeting artifacts, and it costs 1 extra mana.
I think this card in the right decks is going to be an absolute superstar. In a deck where you can get artifacts back, I think immediately of something like your Jan Jansen deck, where you're probably going to be able to get those artifacts back.
This is auto-include.
Probably Osgear loves something like this.
100%.
Those Alibu decks, that Lorehold kind of red-white style.
Any Boros equipment decks that you have, this is great.
And of course, there's going to be other decks that take advantage of it, but I think those artifact decks that really can take good advantage of this, because a lot of those decks are going to be able to get things back from the graveyard even if you accidentally discard it. Right, the biggest downside to gamble is sometimes you gamble for a card and then literally discard it right away. Right. I think the good part about most artifacts decks is they generally have a way baked in to get artifacts back. Right? I think this feels almost the best in a deck like Osgear, if you think about it, because you literally don't care what you discard. You're just going to make the copies of it.
Yep. You pay the X and you make the copy. You make the 2 copies, and you're, it's a net gain overall.
The best part about this card is I know it doesn't mean very much in the grand scheme of things because it's going to see more play in Commander than it does anywhere else, but this is an uncommon, and this is a solid uncommon.
It's a solid uncommon. I'll take this slightly more expensive, mana-wise, and more specific gamble in a heartbeat.
Here's the thing, though. Here's a tutor in a color that doesn't normally get it.
Yeah.
And you're picking a card type that the decks who want this really want this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like this card a lot, and I think it's going to get overlooked. Like we talked about last episode when you set up your pulpit on the Church of the Invasion of Gobakon. I think this is one of those cards where like people are going to overlook this card, but it's really good.
Yes. Well, so then the next card that we have, we're venturing into green territory now. So the next one we have is Leyline Immersion. It's an aura enchantment, costing 3 and a green. It says, enchant legendary creature. So specifically, legendary creatures can't be any other kind. Enchanted creature has ward 2 and tap. Add 5 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast spells.
Andrew, I think there are worse auras that you could put on a creature.
There are worse. Seeing as, you could potentially, you draw this, you can immediately play it. And if you have a creature that doesn't have summoning sickness, you can immediately just tap it, and you net 1 mana already. And that's just for the first turn. Future turns, it's ridiculous.
The reason I love a card like this, and the reason I put it on the list for me, is because you're taking... Let's be honest, there are some commanders where they're there for their ability. They're not terribly good in combat. Like, this is a terrible example, but it shows you kind of where my head's at. A deck like a Modi. A Modi Celebrated Bounty is horrid in combat. It's a 3/1.
You just want it on the
It's literally
field.
there just to cascade. Boom, make it tap for 5 mana.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is one of those cards that's going to take your commander if it isn't good in combat or if it isn't doing what you want it to do anyway. Bam, now it taps for 5 mana. This is going to help a ton of different decks, and I think it's going to make some commanders even better than they could be before because they have an added option of something they can do. And if you have any untapped shenanigans, if you have any ways to, use it more than just that, well, now you can just get a ton of mana.
Yeah, my first thought was putting this in something like Dina, Soul Steeper, and because again, she's just the first one that comes to mind as one that I think you can target her with her own ability of pumping her up with the life gain, but more often than not, you're going to put that on another creature.
But the best part of Dina is her ability doesn't tap her. So you could make the mana and still use her ability if you need to. That's where I think this card is perfect. The commanders where they have activated abilities that don't tap themselves, but they're not super good in combat. I mean, honestly, I just think this card's perfect for that. And I think it's going to get played in a lot more decks than we expect. But what I expect to happen with this card is people are going to overlook it until someone plays it against you, and you're like, holy crap, that's a card.
Yeah, because I'm racking my brain. I'm like, it says spend this mana only to cast spells. What else are you going to use it on?
Well, I mean, you could use the mana to like activate abilities and stuff. But my thing is, I'll happily take 5 mana every turn to cast spells. 5 mana to play
something from my hand, or if I have something I can cast from exile or a graveyard.
Basically, you're turning your commander into, or any legendary creature. I apologize, not just your commander, any legendary creature you control basically gets turned into a pretty great mana dork. So if you think about it, I mean, it's just a card I really
and mana
like.
filtering too.
Yeah, and any colors. So I mean, it gets better the more colors that are in your deck. Yeah. But the other thing that's kind of cool about this is if you were not playing 5 colors, but you have a card that has like the more colors you use to spend this, you get the better ability. You could still get that even though you're not in that color combination.
Yeah,
but. Next up, we have what I expect to probably be the most expensive card in the set when it's all said and done, because it says landfall on it, so people like that. It's Nissa Resurgent Animus, 2 and a green for a 3/3 elf scout. Legendary creature. Nissa's not a planeswalker. Spoiler alert.
Dum-bum-bum.
It says whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. So we see this Lotus Cobra type effect come back. Then if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an elf or elemental card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Well, I mean, most landfall decks play elementals. In fact, elementals are normally very good at using landfall effects. I think this is an interesting space for Nissa. Of course, we've only ever seen Nissa on Planeswalker cards, right? Except the one flip.
Yeah, there
Nissa.
was the one, double-sided.
And of course, all of her Planeswalker cards have always cared about lands. I think this card's really good. I think it's a good card in a landfall deck, but I think this card gets twice as good as if you're playing it with elves or elementals. Like, if you can go get that Avenger of Zendikar or a Shaya or things like that off the top of your library and find it, I like it. And you flip until you hit it. Yeah. So I mean, you know, if you're only playing 3 elementals in your landfall deck and they're all bangers, well then you know you're gonna hit what you want.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm just glad to see that, you know, Nissa's feeling better. She's not caring so much about perfection anymore.
Yeah, we weren't worried about her at all.
Seeing her enter into the Phyrexian clutches of completion was not fun to see from a lore and story perspective. Yeah, no, Landfall is just a great ability, and you pretty much only ever see it in green or green-blue, and of course, because that's the color that's going to benefit the most from it, where you have multiple different cards that allow you to play multiple lands in a turn, or there's, you know, a myriad of cards that, including Myriad Landscape, where you can play it, tap it, 2 more lands come into play, oh, well, I get this ability twice. So yeah, this seems just a little bonkers.
At minimum, this is a second Lotus Cobra in your deck, giving you that first, because you get that first ability no matter how many times it goes off. You only get that second ability the second time it goes off.
Yeah.
So it's like you continue to get that 1 mana every time a land comes in. This is perfect for those scape shifts, you know. So, you know, those Splendid Reclamation plays, you know, that kind of thing. So I like Nissa. It's not a card that I'm like itching to go throw in every landfall deck that I've ever built, but I think there will be people out there who are chasing the card pretty hard.
Yeah, if you've got some elves, you've got some elementals, it's a great include. So next we are continuing the trend of green with Tranquil Frillback. It is a dinosaur creature, 3/3, costs 2 and a green. When Tranquil Frillback, for some reason that's kind of hard to say, Tranquil Frillback enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 green up to 3 times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, choose up to that many. And then it lists 3 options. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, exile target player's graveyard, or you gain 3 life. So,
of course, no one on this podcast likes dinosaurs, so I mean, this seems like an odd pick. I think I like Tranquil.
Or likes green.
Yeah, I like Frillback a lot
dinosaurs.
because it works twofold. One, this is a utility creature in dinosaur decks, which they don't really need them, but they'll happily take them.
Yeah.
And the second is, I think this is could honestly be a pretty decent standard or other format card for a 3-mana 3/3, so it's got a good body. And then for just 1 more green mana, you can hit somebody's artifact or enchantment, nuke somebody's graveyard. I think this is a card that's kind of interesting, and I expect this to see play outside of just dinosaur decks. I think this could be a deck. Think about it. This is a card that you could see play in an ETB deck because you can pay that green in more than one instance. So like the first instance you could pay green, and in the second instance you could pay green again if you're playing in your rock or something that doubles those ETB effects. So I like this card. I think it has a lot of utility. No, it's not splashy. It's not a 7/7 dino that has, you know, fun abilities on it. But I think it's the utility you want from a smaller creature.
This is good, clean magic right here.
It's just good, clean, wholesome magic.
Yeah.
I like it. And of course, I love seeing. My hope is that this is a sign. The couple of the uncommon dinos we got in this set, and of course, Frillbacks are rare, is some of the hints that we're going to see some fun dinos upcoming in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, that we're going to potentially get some new spaces for the dinos, because they're still a tribe that I absolutely love. Well, next up, we have our last of the mono green cards, Undercity Upheaval, 1 and double green for a sorcery with Undergrowth. Distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of creatures you control, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard as you cast this spell. Creatures you control gain vigilance till end of turn. Love seeing Undergrowth, a mechanic that was the Golgari mechanic the last time we went to Ravnica. Love seeing that come back. But Andrew, this card just seems good.
Yeah, and that was my immediate thought when I saw it. I'm like, there's so many great Golgari decks out there where this could be a great sorcery. I'm even fine with paying the 3 just to give all of my creatures vigilance for a turn. I see a lot of benefit there. If you've got a big wide board, if you've got some big stompy creatures, and you just want to give them vigilance so that they stay up for... I'm fine. Personally, I'm fine with paying 3 mana for that. I'm sure there's more effective ways to do that and better cards out there to do that, but the fact that I can also distribute +1/+1 counters on there to make them even bigger and badder, that's even better.
I think this is one of those cards where the decks that want this are going to get all of the benefit out of a card like this, but at minimum, this is an uncommon that's going to be fairly cheap and is going to be accessible to a lot of people to put in their decks.
Yeah.
You know, and let's be honest, vigilance is a really important thing in combat, because a lot of the times, if you notice in Commander, we get into these combats where someone swings with a big creature and you just chump it because... You chump block it because, okay, well, now it's tapped down and I don't have to worry about it, right?
Exactly.
Okay, well, it's tapped down for a turn. Maybe I can get in and attack now. Well, now, no, it's not. It's not tapped down anymore. Now you actually have to worry about it. So maybe it forces people to make different blocks than they were otherwise, because now they have vigilance and can block, or could potentially tap for their abilities. We haven't even thought about that either. I mean, now you could potentially have a creature that could attack and then tap for its own abilities.
Tap for its own ability. Absolutely. Yeah, vigilance is a great keyword.
I love seeing vigilance on a green card.
Well, yeah, you love to see it for yourself.
Oh, I do. I love it. You hate to see it.
Okay, so then next we are finally moving into some of the multicolored cards.
Which is where we're going to start talking about commanders. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Well, yeah, I guess Arnie wouldn't make an amazing commander by himself.
I think he'd be a lot better in the 99 than he would as a commander.
Yeah, I think he'd still be a good commander, but a lot better as a support piece. Anyways, the first one we have up is Calyx, Guided by Fate. It is a legendary enchantment creature, human druid, 2/2 that costs 1 green and white. It says Constellation. Whenever Calyx, Guided by Fate, or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Whenever Calyx or an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may create a token that's a copy of a non-legendary enchantment you control. Do this only once each turn. Oh darn! Why they gotta throw that last sentence on there?
Do you remember a week or so ago when I said, "Man, I love Sithis, but I'm getting into this problem where all my Sithis decks just turn into massive combo piles." I said that knowing full and well that we were getting another Selesnya enchantment commander that looks like a ton of fun. Man, I love the idea of Calyx. Constellation is back, so no matter how many enchantments come in, we get to put counters on creatures.
Yeah.
And then that bottom ability just seems like a ton of fun. There's a ton of things you can do with this. Of course, you can copy your... There's so many ways to make tokens in Enchantress decks when you play enchantments or do things like that. So you can use this to copy your Anointed Processions or your Doubling Seasons to make more and more tokens. If you want to, you can use this to copy your auras and attach them to other creatures. You can do this to just copy your... if you want to play this on more... If you want to, protect yourself a little bit more, you could copy your Ghostly Prisons or your Sphere of Safeties. You know. I like the fact that you get to copy a non-legendary enchantment. You can only do it once per turn, which is, I guess, oh no, heaven forbid you only stop me from doing it once per turn.
Because that could get out of hand very quickly.
But what I really like is this opens up so many avenues for you to take in Selesnya enchantments. It's not like, Sithis, which leans itself into combo. It's not like the green-white sagas commander that we got in Kamigawa, where it pretty much locked you into just playing sagas. I like this because you can take this any way you want to go in Enchantress.
Yeah.
Or enchantments in general.
Yep, it certainly seems like it's playing into the power of green-white and being able to capitalize on all the enchantment good stuff that those colors have to offer.
If you have a green-white X enchantment deck, this makes it clearly better just off the jump. I mean, there's not a single deck that isn't green-white and has enchantments that wouldn't want to play this at minimum just to get a copy of your Sterling Grove or a copy of, you know what I mean? Just something else, right? And then at maximum, you're in a deck that actually can use both of its abilities and you're just going to shine in the process. Or you've been waiting for Enchantment Commander and Calyx is the one that you want to pick. Of course, I have to mention, Calyx no longer a Planeswalker like he was before. We see him just in a legendary card.
It's almost like something happened.
Yeah, it's almost like an unnamed thing happened.
And there's no Planeswalkers anymore.
Next, Andrew, I want to talk about a card that I think a lot of people aren't talking about, but I think has a chance to become a pretty interesting staple for a lot of green-white decks, and that's Cosmic Rebirth. 1 green and a white for an instant. It says choose target permanent card in your graveyard. If it has a mana value 3 or less, you put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put it on the battlefield, put it into your hand and you gain 3 life. So green, of course, is well known for regrowth effects, getting things back to your hand. White is also known for getting things back from your graveyard back to the battlefield. So you see where these two are married together. But I think the really interesting thing about this card is you will happily pay that 3 mana to put a 7, 8, or 9 mana, permanent back into your hand all day, every day, and it's also an instant speed, which means if something you control dies in your opponent's turn, you could put it back to your hand and have it ready to go for your next turn.
For sure.
I don't see any scenario where this card isn't just good in most decks that can play it. I mean, we just got talking about Enchantress Commander, but let's be honest, a lot of green-white decks are either creature-based or enchantment-based, so those really care about permanence, right?
Sure.
If you move up into a lot of your 3-color combinations that have green and white, all of them care about permanence, right? All your Naya decks care about creatures and tokens and enchantments. Most of your Bant decks care about creatures. As you go into Abzan, you really care about your aristocrats and your enchantments. So, to me, I see this card as being almost worth asking yourself, why aren't you running it in a deck that has green-white? Because it could just potentially get your important thing back.
Yeah, I think maybe the thought is that because we're potentially not playing black. I know you mentioned Abzan. This could be include an Abzan, but I think for some players there's going to be the thought, oh well, I don't have the black color cards. I don't have that kind of recursion, and this seems somewhat limiting and specific in some way, so I can understand why people would think that this isn't like an auto include into anything that has green and white. But I think there's enough value there to justify putting it in certain
I would challenge you, if you're still with us, look at this card seriously for your decks that could play it and ask yourself, could your deck get better with it in there? Is it a card that would win you a couple more games, get those things back when you need it? I think it is. At the end of the day, I don't think this is an all-star. This isn't a Smothering Tide. This isn't this isn't an auto-include. But I think this is a card that's worth at least asking the question, can I run this?
But I think that there was some advice that I was given not too long ago, where why not have more graveyard recursion at any chance you can get? Because all those cards are just sitting there. If you're not playing with black colors, then those cards are just sitting there. Every color has some way to access their graveyard in some way. And it seems like just kind of a waste to let those cards sit there when they could come back in some way and help you out in some way. So this is probably a nice one to be able to do that.
Like I said, I think it is limited, but my hope is that I think the limitations add to it by helping you gain some extra life, but I guess that's up to you, the listener, to decide.
As always. Okay, so we are continuing on with the green-white trend, the 3 CMC green-white trend, as it turns out. Next, we have Danatha New Benalia's Light, a legendary creature, human knight. That's a 2/2, costs 1 green and a white. Has Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink, so just super casual.
It would already be good with just those builds.
Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink. And it says once during each of your turns, you may cast an aura or equipment spell from your graveyard. And we know that there's no one here present in this room who likes their auras and enchantments, likes their auras and equipments, and likes making decks centered around those things.
This is a bonkers ability, because if you think about it,
and we thought that the previous Danatha was the one from Dominaria United was super great, allowing you to pull auras and equipment from your graveyard when it enters the battlefield. This is something else.
Where's my Danatha Tribal, baby?
We got 3 of them now.
I think the second ability is sneaky important because of one type of spell that I'm sure you've thought about, but maybe people at home haven't thought about. What about things like Darksteel Mutation? Things like Minimus Containment? Auras that you could play out of your graveyard to lock creatures down.
Curses.
Well, yeah, but I mean, right, let's say I have a Minimus Containment, which turns a creature into a treasure, right? Or I have a Darksteel Mutation in my graveyard. You get rid of the creature it's attached to. Cool, it goes back to my graveyard. Next turn, I get to remove something.
Yeah.
And that's only one way you could take this. Then you have, there's no lack of great equipment that you could play for free out of your graveyard.
Yeah, there's loads of great equipment. Oh darn, you destroyed my Colossus hammer. How could you?
I think this makes like those Mirrodin equipment feel pretty good because you can bring them back out and get a body with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's only like 3 white.
There aren't a ton of them in white.
The rest have red.
There are a lot of really good equipment.
But there's the living weapons ones that that goes into your.
You're probably playing a lot of artifacts. If you want to spin this towards equipment, you're going to play a lot of artifacts, which means something like Nettle Cyst is going to be good. I mean, we're only talking about colorless equipment. Both of these colors have half decent equipment just in their colors. So I mean, I think Danitha seems like a great. Or an equipment spell commander. You still have access to Sigarda's Age. You still have access to Open the Armory and Steel Shaper's Gift. So you still have all of your important cards on that side of things.
And I think Danitha is just a very. It's just such a great card to include in these types of, whether you do it completely Voltron, whether you just want it as a support to be able to spread the aura and equipment love far and wide across your creatures. All 3 Danitha cards have been great at supporting those strategies, and this one I think just takes it to the next level.
Let's just finish. You're taking white, which is the clear equipment color in this combination, right?
Yeah.
And you're adding one of the best support colors in Magic. You're going to add the ramp. You're going to add some trample enablers, some combat enablers.
Well, and we've already got a bunch of nice keywords on
I am excited, Andrew, to see what you do with this, because I know you have to have something kick around in the back of your mind for this thing.
It's coming. It's coming.
It is not coming. Next up, we have a commander that I'm interested to be tinkering around, and when this podcast drops, this commander will be out on the channel, and that is Joriel, Voice of Zalfir. 2 green and a blue for a human druid, 3/3. This is the beginning of combat on your turn. Up to 1 target land you control comes an XX green and blue bird creature with flying and haste till end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. It's still a land. And whenever a land creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. The tagline that I thought up for this to kind of sell this to someone was, if you want to play Tadiova, but you don't want to actually play Tadiova.
You're tired of Tadiova. Here's your sign.
I think Joriel's. There are more cards than you think that make lands into creatures. The first cards I thought of when I looked at this commander was Lair of the Hydra and Hall of Storm Giants from AFR that turn into creatures.
Yeah.
You'd be very surprised how many things can make lands into creatures, and just hitting your opponent with them draws you cards. I love this idea for a deck, and it was very interesting to build this one. And of course, like I said, it will be up on the channel if you want to go check that one out.
Yeah, and even tying into making her own ability, being able to make your lands into creatures. We know that the blue-green colors just have such a hard time getting a large amount of cards in hand.
Remember, it gets flying. It's not even like it gets stuck on the ground. It gets flying.
It's flying.
And you and I both know
evasion.
when you sit down at a commander table, not everybody has flyers all of the time.
And certainly, even less so, reach.
Which means you're going to find someone to be able to hit with it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now we are moving on into a color combo that I'm a bit more excited for. Next up, we have the Kenrith's Royal Funeral.
Andrew, I need you to hit the key on your keyboard that plays taps so we can give the Kenrith's the proper funeral.
Yeah, sad day. This is a legendary enchantment that costs 2 white and a black. It says, when the Kenrith's Royal Funeral enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target legendary creature cards from your graveyard. You draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the greatest mana value among cards exiled this way.
Already pretty darn good.
But wait, there's more. Legendary spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card exiled with the Kenrith's Royal Funeral.
Man, Andrew, it's a shame there hasn't been a ton of commanders that have come out lately that care about legendary cards or creatures, especially not including white and black. I mean, I feel like there'd be so many great decks for this if they just existed.
Yeah, there's certainly not one that I have.
No, you would never build it.
Number one, that doesn't just care about legendary creatures, but legendary stuff in general.
And it is as you would argue, the best 3-color combination in Magic. So.
I don't know how much of an argument it's if it's at that truth and everybody knows it. Yeah, this is a great. I'm going to buy this card at some point to throw into my Dihada Binder of Wills commander deck, because her her middle ability, or -3, I think, is flip mill the top 4 cards of your deck, return any legendary cards from your graveyard to your hand, or you can just keep those in there, make some treasure tokens, boom, play Kenrith's Royal Funeral, and exile those, get some more card draw, and for potentially the rest of the game, your legendary creatures are even cheaper to play.
Probably 2 cost reduction, right? You're most time going to exile 2 legendary spells.
Yeah.
And this doesn't say legendary creatures. This says legendary spells, and that's important for a reason. Number one, Dihada is a legendary spell. She's a planeswalker. All planeswalkers are legendary.
There's legendary artifacts, legendary enchantments.
Yeah, I mean, rest in peace to Kenrith and Linvala. As much as I love them as characters, I mean, we need to say rest in peace, because both of them at least had interesting cards. I'll give them that.
Kenrith still to this day is a bit of a enigma for me to look at and be like, I don't even know how to pin this guy down into a play style, because there's so many crazy options and crazy ways to play him.
If there's like a green jacket club of 5-color commanders, like it's in there with Golos. You know what I mean? Like, of course, what I think is pretty hilarious is, so we saw this card, right, when they first showed March of the Machine, right? They said, hey, this is an example of the cards to come, and then literally Kenrith got reprinted on the Multiverse Legends set in March of the Machine, and I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah, the first thing I thought you were about to say, we saw this card's revealed. I'm like, well, we saw all of them revealed.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Wizards, please don't send anybody to my house.
Please don't send the Pinkertons to our house. We are not leaking any product. Yeah, I really like this enchantment. I think the right decks will get to play this and have some fun with it, and I think this will see some good play in the right decks.
This is great in Dihada. This is great with Joda from Dominaria United.
No,
as well.
Joda would never want a card like this.
No, never. Yeah, this is anything that cares. Is legends matter, legendaries matter. This is, and you have white and black. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to put this in there.
Well, next up we have a Boros commander that I can't imagine anyone sitting on this podcast cares about, but I think we're going to cover it either way.
You just need to leave it at Boros commander, and I'm already halfway there.
It's Nahiri Forged in Fury, 4 red and a white for a 5/4 core artificer. Oh, wait, Nahiri's not a planeswalker? Shocked face? Like,
it's almost like there's a trend.
Yeah. Affinity for equipment. Okay, already good, hard stop. And then whenever a creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. You may cast equipment spells this way without paying their mana cost. Andrew, I could say things. I'll just let you have the floor on this one.
Yeah, so this is one of the decks that I hinted at the beginning of the episode, saying that I was brewing around. Yeah, this is... You had me at Boros. You had me at affinity for equipment. You had me at paying equipment spells without paying their costs. Oh my goodness, this is the trifecta.
Just play every Nahiri card in this deck. Like, this would be a Nahiri tribal deck, because let's be honest, most of her cards are actually pretty good in equipment decks. So
yeah, a lot of them are great. I don't remember which one it is, but there's one that I don't think is super amazing to play along with the equipment sub theme. I think, but oh my goodness, like. So for those who don't know, affinity means that, so for each equipment card that you have, Nahiri costs 1 less generic mana to cast. So,
and I'm 95% sure that erases commander tax as well.
Yes, it does.
So,
I've looked into
this is going to get very good.
Yeah. Again, you play this with the Living Web. Now we can do the Mirrodin cards. Again, where you just, it comes straight off, straight off the top of your library, immediately goes onto the field, and you have a body.
Wait, I figured it out. I figured out the OP strat. You get a Mondrak down, okay? You get an Anointed Procession down. Then you get that Battle Forged Axe when you deal combat damage with it's attached to a creature, you make a copy of it, and you just profit. I mean, that's clearly the way you win.
That's one way. No, this, the way that I'm building this is, of course, lots of equipment that make creatures and then automatically attach. things that have affinity for just artifacts in general. Like I'm pretty sure I put Chiscaria in here from All Will Be One that has affinity for artifacts.
Card just kind of scares me slightly.
Yeah, no, it should.
It exiles way too many cards from my life.
But yeah,
this is coming from the guy who played a Kess deck that just dumped most of my library in my graveyard. I'm like, this is fine, but as soon as you start exiling cards, it's like, whoa, you know.
But yeah, my very first, I think I've shared it before, my very first deck that I bought, you set me up with a deck for our first game, which was the Ranar, the Ever Watchful Precon from Kaldheim, and I got Wyleth, Soul of Steel.
It was a little duty of a precon, I'll be honest, but you said you were interested in blue-white. It was the most recent precon.
Yes. So the first one that I ever actually bought at that same exact time was the Wyleth Auras and Equipments, and I think ever since then I've just had a huge love for the Boros Voltron style, the Boros equipment style.
I wish Wyleth was just a little bit better. Like, I loved its art. I loved the card in general. It just literally got forgotten because we have like 99 Boros equipment commanders and all.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it came out alongside AC, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, Wyleth is going to get overshadowed over that.
And then like literally a couple sets later in AFR, we got like Brunor.
Brunor Battlehammer,
who's like honestly like one of the better equipment commanders we had gotten in the like.
Well, and then even then we got Galia, which is not red white, but it's strictly arguably a better.
I feel like if I feel like eventually you're gonna look back on your Magic playing career and you're just gonna see all of these equipment decks that you tried and then moved on from, and you're gonna be like, that were the times.
Listen to me now. I will never regret. I have zero ragrats for my love for equipment and auras, okay?
to quote Jordan Belfort from the Wolf of Wall Street, I ask you not to judge me on my wins, but judge me on my losses, because I have none of them.
I have none of them.
Next up, we have an enchantment that, I'm going to be honest, is kind of intriguing to me. Is Nahiri's Resolve. 3 red white for an enchantment. It says creatures you control have +1/+0 and have haste. Pretty good on its own, especially in that color combination. Then it says, beginning of your end step, exile any number of non-token artifacts and or creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep. This, I think, has some really interesting upside for me, because I think haste enablers are always great, especially in a color combination that can make tokens, that can do some fun things. But what I like about Nahiri's Resolve is you have the ability, if you really wanted to just Teferi's Protection your whole board of non-token creatures, then just bring them back. Or in an equipment deck, you just Teferi's Protection all of your equipment as well and drop them back in.
Well, and also...
Now, you'd have to reattach them, though.
Yes.
They don't come back in reattached.
And that's why I thought about including this in the Nahiri, and the new Nahiri Forge and Fury deck, but I realized, I know that's going to get expensive with the reattachment costs. But the way I view this, also, the first thing that comes to my mind, this is a strictly better teleportation circle.
In a lot of ways it is, because you get to do multiple creatures. The only bad part is teleportation circle does it immediately. Whereas this, you have to wait till your next... So anything you phase out or anything you exile is gone till your next turn.
But I like that added protection.
No, I think for most decks, you're going to get more advantage out of this than out of teleportation circle. Because teleportation circle is only one creature. But the difference, of course, between those two cards is one of them goes into, one of the best... lovable ETB commanders we've seen over the last year that's kind of broke some decks, and this one goes into a lot of other decks.
Yes.
I like this card a lot. I mean, I don't think it sees play in every Boros deck. I think you could make the argument that it at least deserves consideration. I mean, you think about a deck like Neali, which we just saw from the one precons.
Yeah.
That deck probably is considering playing something like this. The more budget versions of Dejiro and Hazoret or Winoda, some of these Boros like go wide combat decks probably half consider a card like this, because it protects your entire board until your next turn. The only question I have about this card is, if I take this out while your creatures are exiled, do they come back? Because this doesn't give that ability to those creatures. It stays on this enchantment. So I would think you need to have a Clever Concealment or a Teferi's Protection ready to go, because if not, you might be in trouble.
For sure. All right, so we are unfortunately moving away from the Nahiri and the Boros theme, but not too much because we've still got those colors with Narset Enlightened Exile. Yeah, we've seen Narset as a planeswalker and as a creature, so this is no huge surprise.
We
here.
have. She has arguably one of the most broken commanders of all time as a creature.
You could make that argument. You could. I have seen it whiff though. Okay, so yeah, Narset Enlightened Exile is a legendary creature, human monk that is a 3/4, costs 1, blue, red, white. So we're in Jeskai now. She says creatures you control have prowess. Cool. Whenever Narset Enlightened Exile attacks, exile target non-creature, non-land card with mana value less than Narset's power from a graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost.
So I need to start this card by just making a confession, which is that I've been obsessed with trying to make Kaikar work for a really long time. It's been a commander that I've gone back to multiple times, and I keep trying to shove different sub-strategies into it and make it the way it work the way I want to. I got through the literal first line of text on this card, and I was like, my eyebrow was always like, was already like,
Doing a little
okay,
twitch.
I'm kind of interested. And then I read the second part and went, oh, that's not good. I think for me personally, like I'm probably going to commit to trying to move what I was trying to do with Kaikar into Narset, because I think it does everything I'd want to do anyway, make it a little bit better. The thing I love about Narset is that second ability isn't your graveyard, friends. It's anyone's graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
Which means you can get someone's ramp spell if you wanted to. You could get a lot of fun things. And because this says creatures you control have prowess, she has prowess too.
She has prowess as well.
Which means she's going to start getting buffed as well. There are some degenerate things that you could do with this deck. I mean, you could take a lot of the degenerate things that the other Narset does and turn them into this deck, which is what I kind of plan to do with it. But I think this is such a cool space for a Jeskai commander. It takes the Jeskai mechanic from Tarkir being prowess and all the cool things surrounding prowess and puts it on this card, but also just completely updates it in this new way with this fun ability on the bottom. Like if Zurgo and Ojutai was the commander from March of the Machine that I like didn't expect to love, but I loved after like just looking at it for more than 5 minutes, this is the example of the commander from this set where I literally loved it on first look.
Do you believe in love at first sight?
I do, and it's not said in my next
when it comes to cardboard. And yeah, I guess just in case anybody doesn't know, prowess is the ability that whenever you play a non-creature spell, if a creature has prowess, it gets +1/+1 until end of the turn. And the important thing is that it does stack. So if you play a bunch of non-creature spells,
one of my favorite Jeskai cards,
creature.
one of my favorite Jeskai cards of all time is Jeskai Ascendancy, an enchantment that is honestly too broken for its own good.
Yes.
Because its first ability says, anytime you cast a non-creature spell, all your creatures get +1/+1 and untap. That card is broke.
I think the first part is fine, but then when you add the untap part, that's a little ridiculous.
I really love Narset, and when this podcast goes live, this deck should be on the channel. But I'm not just doing it for the channel. This is a commander I'm looking forward to doing myself as well.
I get the joy of playing against it and beating it into the ground.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I have a tendency to either make decks that play wholesome magic or do degenerate things. So you never quite know.
We'll find out soon enough. All right, so who do we have next?
We have Niv Mizzet Supreme. Niv Mizzet is back. It is a 5-color Wooburg commander: white, blue, black, red, green, dragon avatar 5/5. Flying, hexproof from monocolored. Kind of an interesting tag there, but it does probably factor in at some point. And then a cool ability that I didn't realize the value of it until I read it a couple times, which was each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard that's exactly 2 colors has Jumpstart. For those who don't know what Jumpstart is, Jumpstart was the is-it mechanic in the last time we went to Ravnica, which is you can play a spell from your graveyard by discarding a card in addition to paying its mana cost. So Niv Mizzet says every exact 2-colored card in your graveyard has Jumpstart. So it doesn't matter how many mana pips are on the card. As long as it's 2 colors only, it has Jumpstart. Andrew, I don't know if you know, but I'm going to list you a couple cards that are exactly 2 colors. And I want you to tell me if your brain went to the exact same place my brain did.
Okay.
Growth Spiral.
Sure.
Assassin's Trophy.
Sure.
Anguished Unmaking.
Yeah.
Do I need to keep going?
Well, and I think of the Mystical Archive cards where you have I think probably the only sort of dud card out of that would be Electrolyze. D-Spark,
Lightning Helix. I mean, I can
Boros
keep...
Charm. There's a bunch of great instant and sorcery cards that are exactly 2 colors. And also, I really like the Hexproof from Monocode, because if you think about the targeted removal cards, all the ones that come to my head, at least at first, I know there are plenty that aren't, like Assassin's Trophy.
There are enough that are, though.
There are enough that are, but there's plenty that are monocolored.
What are the 2 cheapest removal spells in the format? What color are they?
White.
Yeah, right.
So this automatic protects you from Paths to Exile and Sword to Plowshares.
Yeah, I did not expect to like this card. I mean, let's be honest, I didn't love the last Niv Mizzet from War of the Spark, Niv Mizzet Reborn. To be honest, I looked at it and went, yeah, that's kind of cool. And then we got Atraxa like 2 years later that did the exact same thing with better. I look at this card and I'm like...
We went full Pedro Pascal, but it could be better.
I think this is, in my opinion, this is probably my favorite Niv Mizzet we've seen. I think there's so much cool upside to this. You could play a ton of really fun things with this. I mean, I went after the dirty... easy examples of like some of the best 2-color cards in Commander, but
there's plenty that you can dive deep into.
You could take this any way you want to go. You could make this completely split between all the colors and even this out. You could pick certain sub strategies. I really feel like this deck could be a ton of fun to play, but the thought process that you could use a removal spell and then do it again, and you can do that at instant speed. This doesn't say that, basically, if I have an Assassin's Trophy in my graveyard, all I have to do is pitch a card, pay 2 mana, and I get to still do that.
Because speed. it has a permanent effect of, as long as Niv Mizzet Supreme is out, it has the tagline of Jumpstart.
I love this. You're spell slinging, so you can still, if you really want to get down and dirty, you can play the 1,000-Year Storms. You can play the fun stuff, copying spells and going dirty with it. Right? We get a great spell copier and Galvanic Iteration that already has. The ability on it lets you play it flashback, but you could jumpstart it if you want to. It'll actually be cheaper that way.
Yeah.
But I look at this and I go, man, there are so many great 2-color spells in Magic, and wouldn't it be fun to just play a toolbox of great effects?
Yeah, for sure. This seems like it's got. This is one of those cards where the value of it isn't printed right there for you to see. You have to kind of think, well, this is definitely a card that cares more about the other cards that you're putting in the 99 more so than actually having the focus be on the commander itself.
And I do kind of like this Niv Mizzet, because if you get locked down and you can't get to the 5th color, your deck's probably still full of haymakers that are going to affect the board even when it's not out. And then if you can get to it, like this commander right here talks a lot about how I built my Kess spells list, where it's like, sure, I want to start casting spells on my graveyard, but I'm going to certainly make good use of them on their way to the graveyard, and then eventually when I can get her out and running, then we can start playing right out of the graveyard. But on their way in, they're going to do me a lot of good, and that's how I view this Niv Mizzet.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned toolboxes earlier. I feel like that's a great segue into the next card. With the color combo that we have Rebuild the City. So we've got some people banding together to rebuild New Capenna after the invasion, after Atraxa's invasion.
Shout out to the Riveteers for taking her down.
Shout out to the Riveteers, man. Who would have thought? It's a sorcery that costs 3, and then a black, red, and green. It says choose target land. Create 3 tokens that are copies of it, except they are 3/3 creatures in addition to their other types, and they have vigilance and menace.
Andrew, do you remember at the start of this episode when I said that I had joked about a landfall deck, and I had joked about how Wizards had hit me like the V8 commercials enough time in the head that I needed to eventually build a deck? Do you know which Jund landfall commander I'm going to mention right now?
I could hazard a guess, but please enlighten me.
So I've had a very much toxic love-hate relationship with Lord Windgrace for a really long time. Solo Windgrace, I think, equally can use this card. But, Andrew, the list of broken lands that you can do this to is longer than probably the list of unbroken lands that you can do this to and get value. Yeah. But I looked at this card and went, I can have 4 Field of the Deads. I can have 4... There are some broken things you can put this on, and there are some less broken things. There are some really cheeky lands you can do this to, and there are some not cheeky lands you can do this to. But like, remember, yes, if you make copies of the land, if the land's legendary, it's gonna make legendary copies, and then you have to deal with that.
Pick one, yeah.
But if you wanted to just throw a mirror box into something and then just like make 4 copies of a Dark Depths or make 4 copies of a Valakut, like I feel like there's a lot of ways you could go with a card like this.
And I almost don't even care about the fact that they're creatures either. Like that's a nice little upside. It's like, cool, I've got some lands that are creatures that I could potentially use for some attacks. It's got some nice evasion
Vigilance,
with
Menace, 3/3s.
With Menace, yeah. So
this is 3 landfall triggers.
That's 3 landfall triggers. Yeah, it's 6 mana, but that's even just looking at it from a ramp perspective.
Well, I don't think any landfall player, let's be honest, a lot of those landfall decks have more mana than they know what to do with. None of them are going to turn down paying 6 mana for 3 guaranteed landfall
Guaranteed
effects.
3.
And not even guaranteed your choice of 3 lands to come in. I can make 3 copies of my Field of the Dead or 3 copies of my, in this case, Ziatora's Proving Ground, or 3 copies of whatever I want. It's whatever land is on my battlefield.
You can pick the...
Andrew, it doesn't even have to be my land. It says choose target land. It doesn't even say choose target land you control, Andrew. Like, do you see the hurt that my head went through when I saw this card? I was like, I've already been trying to avoid it as much as my forbidden love for the Gitrog monster should never be realized. It's gonna happen now.
Yeah, this is it's expensive, so you're certainly not gonna be able to play this in your first few turns, but the value here certainly is there to see.
I will say one thing though: the gilded foil, the gilded frame from Straits of Capenna still remains one of my favorite showcase frames of all time.
That Art Deco style.
And cards from this set are continuing that trend for me. I love this card, and I can't wait to play it. And Andrew, we're gonna move immediately from that card into a card I know you're excited about, and doing this Art Deco frame
possible.
justice, and that's Rocco Street Chef. Rocco's back.
He is.
And he doesn't have a card that's just... So when the first one came out, Streets of New Capenna, the card was just, you get to play a secret commander. You go to get a creature out of your deck and put it on the battlefield. He's back with an actual card that has an actual... No, I'm just kidding. No. Rocco Street Chef is red, green, white for a 2/4 elf druid. Beginning your end step, each player exiles the top card of their library. Until your next end step, each player may play the card they exiled this way. Interesting. Whenever a player plays a land from exile or casts a spell from exile, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and create a food token. Whew, okay. Just want to make sure we got food on there somewhere. Otherwise, that was going to be a flavor fail.
Yes. I do have a weak spot for any food token strategies. One of the reasons I'm very welcoming and excited for the upcoming Lord of the Rings Abzan food.
I'm very excited to, in a future game night, have you play Rocco Street Chef and then immediately move into a Hobbit deck with food.
And then immediately move into Guillaume.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
We get it. You like cooking. I'm just kidding. Like,
hey, let my fictional life reflect my reality a little bit, okay?
I'll let you talk about it mechanically, but I just want to say flavor alone, love this card.
Flavor is great.
Love this card.
Yeah, you see that he's there helping rebuild the city, making everybody stronger. You get to play other people's stuff, which is something I feel like you don't get to see a lot in the Naya colors. So yeah,
I actually don't think you do you?
Yeah.
No, it says until your next end step, each player may play the card they exiled this way.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right.
But I mean,
but yeah, so it's sort of group huggy. But you're still reaping the benefits. It's a little politicky. You still get the power of the +1/+1 counters. You get the food tokens to potentially gain life. But honestly, the way I'm taking this is artifact synergies. This is where you play your Idol of Oblivion. This is where you play your inspiring statuary. All the fun artifact synergies that go into mass producing food tokens.
And there are no cards in Magic that care about you casting things from exile or getting benefit for things out of exile.
Passionate archaeologists.
Those don't exist. Here's the really cool thing I like about this that a lot of people don't think about is, and I know that everybody always hates when we bring them up, so let's bring them up. Everyone's favorite Tiefling commander, Prosper. Prosper is well known for playing cards like Uba Mask and the most second to most newest Urabrass that make people exile things instead of drawing them.
A Heretic Praetor.
And what the good of that is for you is that now your opponents they're now forced. I have to play that thing or I lose it.
Yeah, or it's gone. And so they're very much incentivized. And so
what that does is, if let's say your opponent flips a bomb, now they're forced to try to figure out if they're going to play that and if they need to just change their turn. What I like about this is it's going to mess some people up. Or if you have your opponents who are going to try to manipulate the top of their deck, like let's say someone tutored something or something like that and put something on top, well, it's gone now. They tutored for it, but now they have to play it, right? Yeah. I think this card is going to do a lot of fun. And remember, this is 3 mana. This is going to come down potentially on turn 3, if not turn 2, if you're not, if you didn't get your Arcane Signet or something like that, one of your signets. This is going to come down on turn 3.
Listen, we learned from the Magic the Gathering coach that if you're playing green, if you drew a land and you drew ramp, congratulations, you won the game.
But I'm trying to say, this comes down on turn 3. Your opponent flips a 6 CMC spell, that thing's gone. Like, I think this is going to do a lot to disrupt your opponents, as well as just... But I think this is going to be a deck that you're just going to have a ton of fun with.
Yeah, I really like these strategies. I've come to find out that I like tinkering with exile and being able to manipulate stuff like that. This
feels like a great spot for if you like Feldhorn but you don't want to play it as a commander from Baldur's Gate. Yeah. It probably fits really good in this deck.
Yes, Feldhorn is a great include for this deck. I love the inclusion of the white and all the support that white brings.
Hear me out. It could have been Jund. You could have played Prosperous when I was getting
No.
Rocco would have never been Jund. Rocco as a character is 100% Naya, not just because the Cabaretti are Naya and they're the epitome of Naya in my opinion, but just because Rocco is so Naya. It's not funny.
Well, wasn't it the flavor text on his previous card? It's this they would never admit it, but some people join Cabaretti just for the food. Something like that.
Well, of course, we can't talk about Cabaretti without talking about my love for the great Catsby. But anyway,
we're gonna move on before we're here for another 2 hours.
And I'll read the last card, Andrew, because this was one of the cards I picked, just because I think this card is certainly interesting. Well, we've seen a couple Planeswalkers so far that lost their sparks, and we got to talk about one of the more important ones for the March of the Machine story, and that's Karn Legacy Reforged. 5 mana for a completely colorless commander, just 5 colorless mana. Legendary artifact creature Golem. It is a star. Its power and toughness are equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, add colorless mana for each artifact you control. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells until end of turn. You do not lose this mana as steps and phases end. Colorless commanders are always a mixed bag. You never quite know what to expect. And when I saw this card, I was like, wow. Not only did artifacts not need a new commander, but they definitely didn't need one to give them mana every turn.
Yeah.
I think this is a really interesting commander. I mean, I think the top end is slamming a portal to Phyrexia or just slamming these massive artifacts that you have no business of working your way up to and just profiting because you're going to do great.
Yeah.
It's not good that this gets to play All Is Dust and things like that to just ruin your opponent's day.
Yeah.
I'll continue to just love. This one will be going up to this will not be up on the channel by the time this podcast come out, but it will be coming up pretty soon after because this is a commander I don't think I'm interested in playing it for myself, but I'm definitely interested in trying to brew around it at least a little bit.
It's fun to at least take this and, tinker around and be like, what could I do? Yeah, we all know that artifact synergies are just so limiting, and there's just no support for good.
I just really wish there was more artifacts in the game.
So having him be able to add some more resources to be able to cast those and not lose the mana, that's a lot of fun.
Man, well, guys, we finished our review for March of the Machine, the Aftermath. And are the cards that strike our fancy. We don't want to become a podcast that just does reviews straight out. We want to try to keep it to things that interest us because as brewers, it's the cards that interest us or the cards that get us thinking that forces us to or leads us to brew more, right? Those are the kind of cards that keep us brewing and keep us innovating. Andrew, I wanted to end off the podcast with a question for you as a little bit of a gift to anyone who's listened this far through. So as of the recording of this podcast, you will have had a couple of your lists featured on the channel. You've submitted a couple lists to me. You won't have seen when this podcast release. His Contorious list will be the most recent uploaded to the channel. But of course, you haven't seen that episode yet. I just want to get your opinion on what do you think of that process? Have you enjoyed seeing me make jokes about your decks and enjoy them? What have you thought so far about submitting decks to the channel?
I think more than anything else, I always appreciate the opportunity to see how I brew and how I make decks compared to how other people get to do it. So obviously seen a lot of yours, saw Josh do the Gitrog monster and Thalia. And just being able to learn from that, but also as much as having those thoughts of those perfectly respectful and wholesome thoughts of, I don't know that I would do that when I see somebody else's, and then also seeing your commentary or other people's commentary when I play at the table, people giving feedback on, oh, that's a great card to put in there, or are you sure that's a great synergy? And it just makes me think and gives me stuff to reflect on.
My hope has always been that when I'm doing your decks or doing Josh's deck on the channel, that I'm not picking the deck apart. I want to, at the end of the day, it's your list, and I want your integrity of your list to shine through. But my hope is that I can at least provide some commentary on maybe what I would have done differently. Because it's never a bad idea to talk about how a list could be built versus how it's built in front of you, right? We kind of live in this ecosystem in Commander where everything's EDH rec or die. Like, if it's not an EDH rec, the card doesn't exist and shouldn't get played in your deck. And it's a very dangerous space to be in. And what I love about you as a brewer is, as we talked about on our first episode of Commander Brew Crew on our brew philosophy, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you talked about how you build so much more on theme and on different ways of brewing, whereas I'm very much does the card do what I want it to in the slot? How does it interact? Is it efficient? Could the deck be more efficient with this card or that card? Could I take this card out for a card that does 2 or 3 things as opposed to just one? I'm definitely one of those brewers who tries to pack absolutely as much as I can into my brews as opposed to just, but I don't think that that's better than your approach, but I like seeing your decks because it gets me going. One of my favorite parts about brewing having your decks on the channel is I always look through the list before I record. And my favorite moment is when I look at a card and go, okay, like I get it, but I don't get it. You know what I mean? And then I think about it for a minute and I'm like, oh yeah, that actually makes a ton of sense. You know what I mean? And it's like, I love those slow burn cards where you don't realize it until you see that's why I will always love going card by card through my deck text, because it shows you that cards are interconnected.
Yes.
But every card is important. You're not just throwing cards in to get you up to 99.
You shouldn't. I would caution anybody against doing that. But I only know you're being this complimentary. Just because you're being so nice about the way I brew, I'll delay my hostile takeover of the channel
until Lord of the Rings.
until a later date. But it's still coming. But you earned yourself a few weeks.
What's going to be really cool about Lord of the Rings, personally, is going to be that obviously there's going to be some things that I want to brew, and there's going to be the entire set that you want to brew. And I think it's going to be really cool to do some more comparisons between maybe how I would brew something and how you would brew something. And I think it's going to be really cool to kind of get a little bit more. Maybe when we get towards Lord of the Rings, we'll do some more videos where instead of it being just your list, maybe I'll take both of our lists and put them side by side and talk about, differences and that kind of thing.
I'm just excited to see my room just get filled up with Lord of the Rings Magic product as I completely empty my savings account to try and get every single card out.
I think this set is going to be really cool. I'm going to be honest, when I first saw some of it, I was like, okay, it's probably not going to be as cool as I think it's going to be. And then, the more cards we see, the more I'm like, wow, they're actually doing pretty decent on this one. They're actually putting some cool stuff in there. And we haven't even seen all of it yet.
Yeah, I think I've only seen, one card that's kind of sort of a dud. But everything else has been playable in some capacity, if not actually, really, really great.
And I'm excited to see, what are the... We talked about in, I believe it was episode 1 about... or I believe it was episode 2 about the Commander decks and what we hope to see from those. And of course, Andrew will be included in a lot of content when it comes time, because we want to talk about the lore just as much as we want to talk about Magic. Lord of the Rings is something that you care a lot about, and I I do like it, but I think I want to support how much you love it. Like, you loving it makes me more. Of course, leaks are a thing that exist in the world. And I'm sure by the time this episode actually airs, there'll have been more leaks than we've even seen.
Probably.
Right now.
Who knows?
We're going to do our best on this channel to not talk about leaks. I try my best to not talk about leaks. I try my best to only show the things that have been shown.
Yeah, that we know for sure.
Just because someone put the text on Reddit doesn't mean that it's real. I know that's a crazy concept. But thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully, by the time we record next, Joshua will be out of his... positive exile from the podcast.
As he said, maybe he'll finally learn how to put +1/+1 counters on his baby girl.
Make her modified. But for anyone wondering, Josh and his bride and his baby girl are doing very well. They are all learning and growing together, which is exactly what you want to see. My bride and I went through the exact same thing, and seeing it from the outside, it looks a lot sexier than it was from the inside. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm such a harsh critic of myself that maybe it's just because I have a better look at somebody else as opposed to that jaded look of myself. But there are definitely times where I've texted him and he's like, "Yeah, man, I'm doing good." And I'm like, "I wasn't doing good," so I'm glad you were.
I'm glad one of us was able to come out of this with a positive headspace.
But thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you guys next time.
See ya.